The crystal chandelier above her looked like a small galaxy suspended in air, 1,000 fragile suns glittering above a marble world that did not want her in it. 11-year-old Zara Washington stood near the doorway of the Sterling Estate ballroom, clutching the hem of her blue hand-me-down dress as if it could anchor her against the tide of silks and tuxedos that shimmered around her. Mama Ruby had mended that dress 3 times, the stitches were tiny scars of love. It was all Zara had that could be called fancy. She had promised her grandmother she would smile, speak clearly, and remember that poor didn't mean unworthy. The orchestra floated through a Strauss prelude, waiters glided past like white-gloved ghosts, balancing crystal flutes filled with liquid gold. The scent of perfume, champagne, and polished marble made Zara's stomach tighten. She had never been anywhere like this. Outside, the Beverly Hills night hummed with expensive cars. Inside, the hum belonged to money itself, soft, confident, entitled. Mama Ruby's voice whispered in her head, "You're here for that scholarship, baby girl, not to be dazzled by rich folk." Zara nodded silently, though her grandmother was back by the door, speaking to a volunteer about application forms. She took one tentative step onto the marble floor. Her sneakers squeaked. The sound cut through the music like an alarm. A woman in pearls turned. Then another. "Look at that one," someone whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. "What's a child like that doing here?" Heat rushed to Zara's face. She wanted to shrink, to disappear into the folds of the velvet drapes, but pride kept her upright. She had come here to earn an education, not pity. Still, the stairs. The crystal chandelier above her looked like a small galaxy suspended in air, 1,000 fragile suns glittering above a marble world that did not want her in it. 11-year-old Zara Washington stood near the doorway of the Sterling Estate ballroom, clutching the hem of her blue hand-me-down dress as if it could anchor her against the tide of silks and tuxedos that shimmered around her. Mama Ruby had mended that dress 3 times, the stitches were tiny scars of love. It was all Zara had that could be called fancy. She had promised her grandmother she would smile, speak clearly, and remember that poor didn't mean unworthy. The orchestra floated through a Strauss prelude, waiters glided past like white-gloved ghosts, balancing crystal flutes filled with liquid gold. The scent of perfume, champagne, and polished marble made Zara's stomach tighten. She had never been anywhere like this. Outside, the Beverly Hills night hummed with expensive cars. Inside, the hum belonged to money itself, soft, confident, entitled. Mama Ruby's voice whispered in her head, "You're here for that scholarship, baby girl, not to be dazzled by rich folk." Zara nodded silently, though her grandmother was back by the door, speaking to a volunteer about application forms. She took one tentative step onto the marble floor. Her sneakers squeaked. The sound cut through the music like an alarm. A woman in pearls turned. Then another. "Look at that one," someone whispered, not bothering to lower her voice. "What's a child like that doing here?" Heat rushed to Zara's face. She wanted to shrink, to disappear into the folds of the velvet drapes, but pride kept her upright. She had come here to earn an education, not pity. Still, the stairs. However, he continued, if she stumbles, if she embarrasses herself or this gathering with her urban interpretation of dance, she goes right back to the housing projects, back to the roaches and broken dreams, where she belongs. The cruelty in his tone was deliberate, sharp enough to cut through silk. Zara's breath caught. She could feel the sting of tears pressing at her eyes. He wanted her to cry, she saw it in the glint of amusement behind his glass. "Don't you give him that," Mama Ruby's voice thundered in her memory. "You hold your head high. Across the room, Mama Ruby's weathered face had turned to stone. Her knuckles whitened around her purse, but she gave a small, steady nod, a message older than words: show them who you are. Zara inhaled, deep and shaky, and stepped forward. The marble was cold beneath her sneakers. The crowd parted, murmuring. She's actually going to do it, someone muttered. Poor child doesn't know what she's doing. She stopped in front of Sterling. Up close, he smelled of whiskey and expensive arrogance. So, you accept, little mouse? He asked. Or will you scurry back to the shadows? Her voice came clear, surprising even herself. I'm not a mouse. And you don't scare me. A visible ripple ran through the room, a collective intake of breath. Sterling blinked, thrown off balance. You're a very brave little weed, he said finally, tone dripping with sarcasm. Zara lifted her chin. I might be a weed, Mr. Sterling. But weeds grow in concrete. We survive droughts. We push through cracks that kill your roses. For a moment, time fractured. The orchestra, the guests, the chandelier, everything hung weightless in stunned silence. Somewhere a waiter nearly dropped his tray. Even Sterling's smirk faltered. The words didn't sound rehearsed, they sounded true. And truth, spoken in a place built on pretense, had its own power. Zara turned and crossed to the edge of the dance floor where her small battered radio sat inside her grandmother's tote. She set it down, pressed the worn button, and after a sputter of static, the thin strains of the Blue Danube floated into the air. The sound was cracked and imperfect, but the melody was unmistakable. The crowd stared, at the cheap radio, at the girl in the patched dress, at the audacity of defying a billionaire with beauty born from broken speakers. To them it was absurd, to Zara it was home. That melody had filled their tiny apartment many nights while Mama Ruby showed her how to count steps across linoleum floors. Music's the same everywhere, she had said. It don't care about color or rent. Now, under the chandelier's rain of light, Zara closed her eyes and let the rhythm take her. The murmurs blurred. The marble floor might as well have been their old kitchen tiles. She swayed, one hand rising as if reaching for the memory of her mother's lullabies. Fear loosened its hold. She began to turn, a small, graceful revolution that quieted even the skeptics. Then, from the far side of the room, a boy's voice, I want to dance with her. Every head turned. A hush swept through the ballroom like wind through curtains. The boy stepped forward, his dark hair perfectly combed, his navy blazer gleaming under the lights. Marcus Chen, son of Senator Patricia Chen, heir to another kind of power. He walked toward Zara with the calm certainty of someone who had never been told no, until now. His mother's voice cracked the silence, Marcus. Come back this instant. He ignored her. When he reached Zara, he extended his hand. May I? Zara stared, uncertain. Are you sure? Yeah, he whispered. Let's show them. Their hands met. Her calloused fingers against his soft palm. The orchestra musicians, sensing a story, picked up the tune from the radio. The waltz grew fuller, swelling through the ballroom. They began to move, awkwardly at first, then with surprising rhythm. Marcus's polished steps met Zara's instinctive grace, where his training ended, her heart filled the space. Gasps turned into silence. Even the chandelier seemed to glow warmer, its light softening the sharp edges of the room. Mama Ruby stood at the edge of the crowd, tears bright in her eyes but her smile fierce. Around her, the same guests who had whispered mockery now watched in reverent stillness. The waltz ended with a final spin. Zara's dress flared like a small blue flame before settling around her ankles. She and Marcus stood panting, hands still joined, eyes wide with disbelief. Then, applause. Tentative at first, then thunderous. It rose from the corners of the ballroom, filling every crystal facet of the chandelier with reflected sound. James Sterling stood motionless, glass frozen halfway to his lips. The challenge meant to humiliate had become a miracle he could not control. For the first time in decades, the billionaire felt something he couldn't name, a flicker of shame, perhaps awe. Zara looked up at him, breathless but steady. "I believe," she said softly, "that counts as a waltz." The crowd erupted again, and in that burst of applause the balance of power shifted forever. The girl from the projects had stepped beneath the chandelier meant for kings, and made it her own sky. The applause that had thundered through the ballroom faded into an uneasy hush. For a heartbeat Zara believed it was over, that she could slip away beside Mama Ruby and never see these people again. But the man who owned the chandelier, the marble, even the silence itself, was not finished. James Sterling had built his empire on control, and nothing unsettled him more than a child who refused to obey humiliation. He set his glass down with surgical precision. "Well," he said, voice as smooth as polished steel, "we can't end a demonstration without a judge." Laughter rippled, brittle, uncertain. "You've danced, little one. Now let's see if you can live with the consequences." Zara felt the air grow thin. The words "a deal's a deal" still echoed from the crowd's approval, yet she could tell he would twist them. His eyes gleamed, not with admiration, but calculation. "Tomorrow," he continued, "my legal team will prepare the adoption papers. Let the record show that I, James Sterling, keep my promises." Applause again, perfunctory this time. The guests clapped because wealth demanded witnesses, not because they believed in what they'd seen. Mama Ruby stepped forward, her back straight despite the tremor in her hands. "Mr. Sterling, my granddaughter doesn't need a spectacle. She needs a school." The billionaire's smile never reached his eyes. "Mrs. Washington, I'm offering her both." His tone turned fatherly, dangerous. "A proper education, a home worthy of her potential. Surely you want that?" The question wasn't meant to be answered, it was meant to corner. Around them, guests nodded approval, already rewriting the night's cruelty into philanthropy. Zara looked up at the chandelier, at its perfect glass stars, and felt smaller than ever. When the limousine dropped them at their apartment later that night, the neighborhood seemed to collapse inward, flickering. Streetlights, sirens far off, walls painted with graffiti that looked tired rather than rebellious. Zara held Mama Ruby's hand tight. "You did good, baby," her grandmother said. "Better than good." "But I don't understand," Zara whispered. "He said he'd adopt me." Mama Ruby sighed, unlocking the door. "Sometimes rich men say things they don't mean, especially when people are watching. But if he keeps his word, we'll make sure it's on our terms, not his." Inside, the radio that had saved her dignity sat on the counter, silent now, its cracked speaker dusted with glitter from the ballroom. Zara touched it like a wound. She wanted to believe the applause had changed something, that dignity could rewrite destiny. Morning brought headlines. Billionaire promises to adopt project prodigy. From slums to Sterling estate. Mama Ruby read them aloud with a snort. "They talk like you a lottery ticket, not a child." Reporters camped outside the building. Cameras blinked whenever Zara peeked through the curtains. Sterling's office released a statement confirming preliminary proceedings of a humanitarian adoption. To the world it looked noble, to Zara it felt like being acquired. 2 days later a black Mercedes pulled up. The driver wore gloves the color of frost. He handed Mama Ruby an envelope sealed with Sterling's crest. Inside, an invitation to dine at the mansion, to discuss the terms of Zara Washington's transition. Mama Ruby pressed her lips together. Transition. Like you changing schools instead of worlds. That evening, the mansion was quieter than before, stripped of music and crowd. Only the chandelier remained, throwing prisms over a table set for 3. Sterling rose as they entered, immaculate as ever. Mrs. Washington, Miss Zara. He gestured toward the chairs. I trust you've recovered from the excitement. Mama Ruby didn't sit. Before we talk, I need to know why. Why her? Sterling's smile flickered. Because the world should see that opportunity transcends background. Because the media loves a redemption story. And, he added after a pause, because the girl can dance. Zara stiffened. I danced because you dared me. And you won, he said, eyes narrowing. I reward winners. The food arrived, silver covers lifted to reveal perfection. Zara could barely swallow. Sterling spoke of tutors, uniforms, manners, proper posture. Each word sanded away another piece of her. When he finally asked, would you like to be a Sterling, she didn't know how to answer. Mama Ruby did. We'll sign nothing tonight. For the first time, irritation cracked his charm. Mrs. Washington, delay invites gossip. Then let them gossip, she said. My granddaughter ain't merchandise. If this adoption happens, it'll happen with respect, not spectacle. Zara saw something flash in his eyes, respect or recognition, she couldn't tell. Very well, he said smoothly. Tomorrow, my lawyers will visit. Bring whatever counsel you trust. As they left, Zara glanced back at the chandelier. Its light no longer dazzled, it glared. She understood now, beauty could blind you to cruelty if you stared too long. The legal meetings that followed were a blur of ink and implication. Sterling's team spoke of guardianship, financial oversight, image management. Words like ward, inheritance, and liability floated through the room like perfume, sweet, poisonous, impossible to grasp. Mama Ruby fought for clauses that protected Zara's heritage, her right to visit home, her education. The lawyers smiled thinly. We'll see what's feasible, they kept saying, which meant no. Through it all, Sterling watched, silent, assessing. When the final papers were ready, he signed first, his pen slicing the page with certainty. Then he passed the pen to Zara. Welcome to the family, he said. The words landed heavy. Family wasn't supposed to feel like a contract. That night, back in their apartment, Zara asked, do you think he cares about me? Mama Ruby pulled her close. I think he cares about what you make him feel. But feelings fade. You keep your head, you remember who you are. Zara nodded, though she didn't understand fully. Outside, news vans still waited, eager for the morning shot of the billionaire's car returning for his new daughter. Inside, the little radio sat silent on the counter. She turned its dial until the old waltz crackled alive again. The melody trembled, thin but defiant, like her. Under that music, she whispered a promise only the night could hear. They can move me to a palace, dress me in gold, but they will never make me forget where I learned to dance. Tomorrow she would step through Sterling's gates, not as a guest, not as a charity case, but as someone entering the lion's den with her head held high. The challenge meant to break her had only begun, and she intended to be the one who decided how it ended. The Sterling estate had been designed to silence people like Zara Washington. Every corridor was a sermon in wealth, marble echoing underfoot, portraits glowering down from gilt frames, ceilings high enough to dwarf defiance. For 2 days she wandered through it as if through a dream she hadn't agreed to have. Reporters called her the miracle girl, but inside the mansion she felt more like a headline than a human being. James Sterling kept her busy. Tutors arrived with thick folders, tailors took her measurements, public relations staff briefed her on optics. She was told what to say if reporters shouted questions, how to smile for the cameras, what fork to use at breakfast. No one asked what she wanted. The world saw an adoption, she saw captivity dressed in velvet. By the third afternoon, the ballroom was being prepared for yet another charity event, this one filmed for television, meant to cement the image of Sterling the savior. Workers polished the marble until it glowed like ice. The same chandelier that had witnessed her humiliation was being refitted with fresh bulbs, each one bright enough to erase shadows. Mama Ruby stood with Zara at the edge of the room. "You sure you want to go through with this?" she whispered. Zara nodded. "If I don't dance tonight, they'll say I'm ungrateful. If I do, maybe they'll remember I'm brave." She didn't add that she needed to remind herself of that too. When the guests began arriving, Zara felt the temperature of the room drop. Wealth had a way of doing that, chilling everything it touched. Photographers lined the staircase, flashes exploded like small storms. Sterling appeared beside her, a hand resting on her shoulder for the cameras, his smile polished to perfection. "Ready to show them again?" he murmured. It wasn't a question, it was a command disguised as encouragement. The orchestra began tuning. The scent of perfume and champagne thickened. Zara's pulse thundered in her ears. The MC introduced her as the little prodigy whose courage touched a nation. Applause filled the room, too loud, too practiced. She stepped onto the dance floor, the same marble battlefield where she had once turned fear into defiance. But tonight felt different. The waltz wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to Sterling's narrative, to the story he wanted the world to believe. She wished the boy from that first night were here, the one who had taken her hand when everyone else wanted to see her fall. And then she saw him. Across the ballroom, near the champagne fountain, Marcus Chen stood beside his mother, Senator Patricia Chen. His posture was impeccable, his navy blazer immaculate, but his eyes, those were the same eyes that had met hers with empathy when she'd been alone under the chandelier. He wasn't supposed to be here. Politics and power didn't usually mix with scandal, yet here he was, watching her with something like pride. Sterling followed her gaze. "Ah, the senator's boy," he said quietly. "Impressive family. Keep dancing. Connections matter." The orchestra struck the opening notes of the Blue Danube. Zara lifted her chin, but her heart felt heavy. She took her first step alone. 1 2 3, 1 2 3, the rhythm was perfect, but empty. Cameras flashed, people murmured approval. It was everything Sterling wanted, a performance, not a person. And then a voice cut through the music. "I'd like to dance with her." It wasn't loud, but it carried. Every head turned. The music faltered, the cameras pivoted. Marcus Chen was walking toward her, his mother's hand gripping the air behind him, too shocked to pull him back. The boy's face was calm, almost solemn. "Marcus," Senator Chen hissed, "you'll embarrass us." He didn't even glance her way. "Mr. Sterling," he said evenly, "may I?" For the first time that evening, Sterling looked uncertain. Cameras recorded his hesitation, his calculating glance toward the reporters. "Of course," he said finally, his tone tight. "The young lady could use a partner." Marcus reached Zara and extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" Zara hesitated. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because you shouldn't have to dance alone." She looked into his eyes and saw no pity, only solidarity. Around them, guests murmured, some scandalized, others enchanted. Sterling's PR manager frantically gestured to the cameraman to keep rolling. What had begun as spectacle was becoming something else entirely. Marcus placed one hand lightly on her waist, the other in her trembling fingers. The orchestra picked up the melody again, softer this time, uncertain. Zara exhaled and moved. At first they stumbled, his polished lessons clashing with her instinctive rhythm, but then something extraordinary happened. They found each other's timing. His precision met her passion, his structure her soul. The sound of their steps echoed through the ballroom like a heartbeat. Guests who had once whispered insults now held their breath. Mama Ruby's eyes glistened with tears. Even Sterling watched, frozen, unable to decide whether to feel anger or awe. "Left, right, turn," Marcus whispered, guiding her gently. "I'm trying," she whispered back. "You're doing more than trying." The chandelier scattered light across their faces, painting them in gold and sapphire. Each turn erased another line between privilege and poverty, between mockery and meaning. They weren't performing anymore, they were reclaiming the waltz from Cruelty. When the music swelled toward its crescendo, Marcus tightened his grip. "Ready?" he asked. "For what?" "To finish this together." They spun. Her blue skirt flared, his blazer caught the light, and for an instant they seemed suspended above the marble, gravity bowing to courage. The final note lingered like a held breath before dissolving into silence. For a moment no one moved. Then applause crashed over them, a roar this time, not the brittle clapping of politeness but the sound of people realizing they had witnessed something real. Zara looked up at Sterling. His face was unreadable. The cameras caught everything, the tremor in his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. Publicly he was trapped. Privately he was shaken. He approached them slowly, every movement measured. "Well done," he said. "Both of you." His gaze shifted to Marcus. "Your parents must be proud." "They will be," Marcus replied. "Someday." Laughter, uneasy again, rippled through the room. But the power had shifted. For once, Sterling wasn't directing the story. Two children were. Zara curtsied slightly, her voice calm and sure. "Thank you for the dance, Marcus." "Anytime," he said, meaning it. Mama Ruby reached her granddaughter's side as the crowd surged forward, journalists shouting questions, flashes bursting. "Come on, baby," she murmured. "Before they turn this into another show." Sterling raised his hand for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I think we've seen enough for tonight. Let's give these young people a round of applause they'll never forget." The clapping began again, louder, longer. But Zara heard only her heartbeat and Mama Ruby's whisper, "You showed them, child. You showed them who you are." As they left the ballroom, Marcus caught her eye one last time. He mouthed two words, "Don't stop." Outside, the night air tasted of freedom and fear. Somewhere behind her, the chandelier still glittered, but its light no longer belonged to Sterling. It belonged to the girl who had dared to step beneath it, and to the boy who had stepped forward beside her. In that shared courage, something unspoken had begun, a promise that the waltz would not end here. It would keep echoing through corridors of power until even the people who built those halls had to listen. The first night Zara spent at the Sterling estate did not feel like a beginning. It felt like a transaction. The air smelled of polish and lavender, the kind of sterile luxury that erases all trace of the people who clean it. Her new bedroom was 3 times larger than Mama Ruby's entire apartment, yet it felt emptier. The bed was a cloud of silk and feathers, but Zara lay awake on top of the covers, afraid to move, afraid to dream. Downstairs, cameras still littered the driveway from the press conference Sterling had staged that afternoon. He had stood beside her, smiling for the world, one hand resting on her shoulder like a signature on a contract. "Today we prove that hope has no color," he'd said to the microphones. The crowd had applauded. Zara had kept her smile frozen. She understood now what Mama Ruby meant when she said there are chains you can't see. The morning began with a schedule. A printed document, delivered by a maid in a crisp uniform. 7 a.m., breakfast. 8 a.m., introduction to Miss Ashworth, deportment and conduct. 10 a.m., interview with Sterling Communications team. 12 p.m., lunch with Mr. Sterling. 1 p.m., rest/study time. Rest, Zara whispered to herself. From what? At breakfast she sat at a table so long it could seat a basketball team. Sterling read the Wall Street Journal at the far end. When she thanked the maid for orange juice, the woman flinched as if politeness violated protocol. Sterling looked up. "Remember, Zara, this is your home now. You don't need to thank the staff. They're here to make life easier." Zara swallowed. "Mama Ruby says you thank people because it keeps your heart right." A pause. Then Sterling folded his paper neatly. "In this house, manners mean efficiency. Sentiment is a distraction." He returned to his paper, ending the conversation. At 8 sharp, Miss Victoria Ashworth arrived. She was tall, immaculate, her gray hair pulled tight enough to smooth out emotion itself. The scent of starch followed her like authority. "A lady," she announced, "must never betray uncertainty. Shoulders back. Chin high. Walk as if the world owes you space." For 2 hours she adjusted Zara's posture, corrected her speech, and erased every trace of rhythm from her step. "No contractions," she snapped. "No slang. Try again. You sound common." By noon Zara's throat ached from repeating phrases that didn't feel like hers. At lunch Sterling evaluated her progress as though inspecting a prototype. "She's learning," Miss Ashworth reported. "Good," Sterling said. "We'll have another lesson this evening. Presentation matters." That night Zara found the courage to call Mama Ruby. The butler handed her a phone so polished she could see her reflection trembling in it. "Baby, how they treating you?" Mama Ruby asked. Zara hesitated. "They give me everything, but it feels like I don't own any of it." "Then keep what's yours, inside," Mama Ruby said. "They can polish your shoes, but they can't polish your soul." The next day brought photographers again. Sterling's PR director rehearsed Zara's answers. "When they ask how you feel, you say, 'I'm grateful for a second chance.' When they ask about your past, keep it light, people like inspiration, not struggle." Zara nodded, though every word tasted wrong. During the interview, a reporter knelt to her height and asked, "What's it like having a billionaire father now?" Zara blinked. The script dissolved. "I still have a grandmother," she said simply. "And I don't think money makes someone a father." Sterling's jaw tightened. The interview ended early. That evening he appeared at her doorway. His silhouette filled the frame like a question mark. "You embarrassed me today," he said calmly. "I told the truth," she replied. "There's truth," he said, stepping closer, "and there's narrative. People invest in the second." Zara looked up at him, unafraid. "Then maybe they should start investing in the first." For a moment, silence cracked between them. Then he turned away. "Miss Ashworth will double your sessions." Days bled into one another, lessons, interviews, rehearsals for a life that wasn't hers. The mansion echoed with music she wasn't allowed to dance to. The only warmth came from the kitchen, where the cook, Mrs. Dawson, snuck her cornbread and stories about the staff's secret poker games. "You keep your chin up, sweetheart," Mrs. Dawson whispered one night. "That man thinks he bought himself redemption. But he don't know redemption can't be bought, it's earned." That phrase lodged in Zara's heart. A week later, Mama Ruby arrived for the first formal meeting with Sterling's legal team. She wore her Sunday best, the same lavender hat she'd worn to every important day in her family's history. When she entered the marble foyer, the maids stopped to stare. There was something about her that made the luxury around her seem smaller. Sterling greeted her politely. "Mrs. Washington, I trust you found the arrangements suitable." Mama Ruby's eyes swept the room, the chandeliers, the portraits, the cold shine of wealth, and then landed on her granddaughter standing stiffly beside Miss Ashworth. "She looks polished," Mama Ruby said. "But not happy." Sterling's smile thinned. "Happiness comes later. Stability first." "Funny," Mama Ruby said. "Where I come from, happiness is stability." The lawyers cleared their throats, uneasy. Papers rustled. Signatures were exchanged. The adoption became official in the eyes of the state. When the meeting ended, Mama Ruby pulled Zara aside. "You remember what I told you. Love's not a uniform. Don't let them iron you flat." Zara hugged her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of jasmine and coffee. It was the last moment that felt like home. That night Sterling poured himself whiskey in the study. The room was dim, lined with shelves of untouched first editions. He gestured for Zara to sit opposite him. "Do you know why I adopted you?" he asked. "Because the cameras were watching." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Partly. But also because I saw something in you I've never seen in anyone else. Pity. Fight," he said quietly. "The same kind my daughter had." Zara froze. He had never spoken of his daughter before. The way he said had carried the weight of a grave. "I lost her in an accident," he continued, staring into his glass. "She was about your age. Danced like you, too." Zara felt the pieces clicking together, the way he watched her dance, the sudden adoption, the obsession with control. He wasn't saving her. He was replacing someone. "I'm not her," Zara said softly. "I know." But his voice said he didn't. When she left the study, her steps echoed through the corridor, the chandelier light cold on her skin. She understood now what the bargain truly was. Sterling had given her a palace, but in exchange, he wanted her to resurrect his ghost. That night she sat by the window with the radio Mama Ruby had mailed her. Its cracked speaker still hummed faintly. She turned the dial until she found a slow waltz, the same melody from the night that changed everything. Outside, Los Angeles glittered like a promise it didn't mean to keep. Zara whispered to the city, to herself, to the spirit of the girl she refused to replace. I'll dance again. But next time, it'll be for me. And somewhere deep in the mansion, perhaps even in the heart of James Sterling, a truth began to tremble. The bargain was shifting, and the girl he thought he owned was becoming someone he could never control. The mansion had a strange way of swallowing sound. Even the wind outside seemed to hesitate before crossing its thresholds, as if afraid to disturb the perfection within. Weeks passed like that, soft voices, polished shoes, polite silence. Zara Washington learned how to move without being seen, how to survive within the marble hush of wealth that never slept. By now she knew every hallway, except one. The East Wing. It was always locked, or so the staff said. Even the maids avoided it, whispering that Mr. Sterling kept old things there. But one gray afternoon, while Miss Ashworth lectured a butler about table symmetry, Zara saw her chance. She slipped away from her lessons, the click of her shoes swallowed by the velvet carpets. The further she walked, the dimmer the light became. Chandeliers gave way to bare sconces, then to dust and stillness. A faint draft stirred her hair, carrying the smell of cedar and something older, grief, perhaps, left too long in one place. At the end of the corridor stood a single white door. Its paint had yellowed with age, and unlike the rest of the house, it bore no golden plaque or carved crest. It was plain, ordinary, and therefore completely out of place. Zara reached for the handle. It turned easily. No lock. No guard. Only secrets. Inside was a room frozen in time. The air was heavy with dust, yet nothing had decayed. A little girl's room, wallpaper in faded pastels, shelves lined with porcelain dolls staring from behind glass. A rocking horse sat near the window, its mane dulled but intact. On the vanity rested a small music box shaped like a heart. Zara's breath caught. The moment she lifted the lid, the melody that spilled out was delicate and mournful, for Elise. The notes spun into the air like ghosts. In the mirror above the vanity, Zara's reflection shimmered, blurred by sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains. For a second, she thought she saw another face overlapping hers, a girl with pale hair and eyes the color of glass. Then it was gone. She turned toward the dresser. Photographs lined the top, dozens of them. A young James Sterling smiling beside a girl in a pink tutu. A birthday cake with 7 candles. The same child laughing, dancing, living. The girl was everywhere, perfectly preserved. Her name was Elena, came a voice from behind. Zara froze. Sterling stood in the doorway, his figure framed by the faint light of the hall. He looked smaller somehow, less certain, the mask of control slipping away. "I told them to keep this room locked," he said quietly. But perhaps it wanted to be found. Zara's fingers trembled as she closed the music box. "Was she your daughter?" He stepped inside. "She was everything." His voice cracked on the word. "She died in a car accident. My wife was driving. I was in Tokyo, closing a deal that couldn't wait. I missed her recital. Missed everything." The words fell heavy, thick with guilt. Sterling crossed to the dresser, brushing dust from one of the photographs. "She danced here, in this room. Every night before bed. Said she'd be a ballerina one day." He set the frame back down. "Now all I have are these." Zara's throat tightened. "That's why you made me dance," she whispered. "Because I reminded you of her." He turned toward her, eyes bloodshot but steady. "You have her spirit. Her fire. When you stood on that ballroom floor, it was like she'd come back to me for a moment." Zara shook her head. But I'm not her. I can't be. I know, he said. But the way he said it made her doubt that he truly did. They stood in silence, surrounded by the ghosts of his past. Dust motes floated like suspended tears in the air. Finally Zara asked, why keep it all like this? Because letting go would mean admitting she's gone, Sterling said simply. And I don't know how to do that. Zara looked around the room again, the toys, the music box, the frozen smiles. Maybe you don't have to let her go, she said softly. Maybe you just have to stop keeping her prisoner. He blinked, startled. What do you mean? She's still here, Zara said. But not in these things. In you. In what you do for others. You keep saying I remind you of her, but maybe I'm here so you can remember how to live, not how to grieve. Sterling didn't answer. He walked to the window, pushing back the curtains. Light spilled across the room, stirring dust into golden motion. For the first time, the place looked alive again. She would have liked you, he said finally. You would have been friends. Maybe, Zara said, then hesitated. But she wouldn't want you to try to make me her. He turned, meeting her gaze. You're right. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked truly human. The hard edges of his face softened, the lines of power etched by years of business battles replaced by something fragile. Regret. Will you help me change things? He asked. Zara frowned. Change what? This house. My company. Myself, if it's still possible. I don't know how, she said. Yes, you do, he replied. You started when you stood up to me that night. You started when you danced. Zara wanted to believe him, but part of her knew that guilt could be as dangerous as cruelty. It made people build prisons of kindness that still trapped whoever lived inside. I'll try, she said finally. Sterling nodded once. Good. He gestured toward the door. Come. You shouldn't stay in here too long. The past has sharp edges. As they stepped into the corridor, Zara glanced back one last time. The music box sat open on the vanity, the ballerina inside still turning slowly, as if waving goodbye. Then the lid closed with a soft click, sealing the room, and whatever peace lingered within it. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. The conversation replayed in her mind like the music box melody she couldn't turn off. She saw Sterling's face in the dark, the pain behind his control, the desperation behind his generosity. She understood him now, but understanding didn't make her feel safe. She rose from bed and walked to the window. The garden below glowed under moonlight. Somewhere beyond the hedges, Mama Ruby's words echoed in her memory, they can polish your shoes, but they can't polish your soul. Zara touched the glass. I'm still me, she whispered. No matter what they try to make me. Behind her, the bedroom door creaked open. Sterling stood there in his robe, startled to see her awake. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. She didn't answer. He stepped beside her at the window. You're right, he said quietly. About the room. About everything. Tomorrow, I'll have it cleaned and opened again. It's time. Zara looked at him. For a brief moment, she saw not the billionaire who had humiliated her, but a broken father trying to start over. Maybe that's what ghosts need, she said. Someone brave enough to open the door. He smiled faintly. You've already done that. The house settled around them, its silence softer now, less suffocating. Somewhere in the east wing, a faint melody drifted through the walls, for Elise, played by no one, carried by memory alone. The ghosts were moving on, and so, at last, was Zara. The morning light spilled across Zara's desk in a soft gold that felt like forgiveness. For the first time since arriving at the Sterling estate, she wasn't afraid of the day ahead. The ghosts had been acknowledged, and with them, something in her had changed. She was no longer simply surviving in this house, she was beginning to look for ways to shape it. Miss Ashworth still came every morning, her voice clipped, her perfection suffocating. But Zara had stopped shrinking. When the woman corrected her accent, Zara repeated the sentence deliberately, her tone firm, her posture her own. "A lady never slouches," Ashworth said. "A lady," Zara replied, "doesn't have to make herself smaller." The older woman's jaw tightened. It was a small rebellion, but one that planted its first seed. Sterling noticed the shift too. At breakfast he watched Zara reading a newspaper article about an overcrowded public school in East LA, the kind of place she might have gone if life had been fair. "Why do you read that grim stuff?" he asked, buttering toast with mechanical precision. "Because I lived it," she said simply. "And because nobody else here will." He looked at her for a long time. "You can't save the world, Zara." She folded the paper neatly. "Then maybe I'll start small." That sentence would echo through their lives. The transformation began quietly. It started in the library, where Zara found the courage to read beyond the etiquette manuals Ashworth assigned. She devoured history books about civil rights leaders and biographies of women who had turned pain into purpose. Each story added a brick to the foundation she was secretly building inside herself. One afternoon, she discovered Sterling pacing in his office, muttering about investors and image control. "The public still sees me as the man who humiliated a child," he grumbled. Zara hesitated at the door. "Then maybe it's time you did something different." He looked up sharply. "Different how?" "Use your money to help the kind of people you hurt." The suggestion hung in the air like an uninvited guest. Sterling frowned, as though the idea of doing good for reasons other than optics was foreign to him. "And what would you propose?" She hesitated, then pulled a notebook from behind her back. The pages were filled with her careful handwriting, charts, and clippings. "A foundation," she said. "Named after Elena." Sterling blinked. "You'd use my daughter's name?" Zara nodded. "Because she loved to dance. Because she never got the chance to grow up and help anyone. Maybe this way, she still can." He took the notebook from her and began to flip through it. Each page detailed ideas for scholarships, after-school programs, and mentorships for children from low-income neighborhoods. There were cost breakdowns, potential partner organizations, and even a draft mission statement, to give every child a stage to stand on, no matter where they begin. "You did all this yourself?" he asked quietly. Zara smiled. "You taught me about presentation. I just found something worth presenting." For a moment, the mask of the businessman slipped. Sterling's eyes softened. "Elena would have liked you," he murmured. Zara met his gaze. "Then help me make sure other girls like me get liked, too." Over the next weeks, the mansion changed. Not physically, the marble floors still gleamed, and the chandeliers still sparkled, but its atmosphere shifted. Sterling spent less time in his boardroom and more time listening. Zara's voice began to matter. Her energy infected even the staff. Mrs. Dawson started saving leftovers for food drives, the chauffeur donated old coats, and even Miss Ashworth's lectures softened, as though resistance was futile against the girl's quiet purpose. But the idea of the Elena Foundation wasn't met with universal approval. "You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment," said George Larkin, Sterling's oldest business partner. "A charity run by a child? It's bad. Optics. Investors will see weakness." Sterling leaned back in his chair. "Maybe they'll see humanity. Humanity doesn't raise profits." Zara, sitting in the corner with her notebook, raised her eyes. "No," she said softly, "but it can save reputations." Larkin turned toward her, eyebrows arched. "And you are the reason your company still has an audience," she said. The words shocked even Sterling, but he didn't interrupt. When Larkin left in a huff, Sterling chuckled quietly. "You're dangerous when you're right." The plan took form like a dance rehearsed in secret. Zara met with accountants to understand budgets. She interviewed teachers over video calls about what their students needed most. Mama Ruby visited once a week, offering wisdom and cornbread in equal measure. "Don't build something they can steal," she warned. "Make it strong enough to stand without their names on it." Late at night, Zara sat by her window, designing logos on sketch paper. One image kept reappearing, a cracked radio surrounded by stars, the symbol of music rising from broken things. "That's it," Sterling said when he saw it. "It's her dance, and yours." For the first time, they were partners. The day of the first presentation arrived with the sharp scent of nerves. The Sterling boardroom, usually a place of ruthless efficiency, now hosted potential donors and journalists. Sterling gave the opening remarks, his tone confident but warmer than usual. "I once believed wealth was power," he said. "Then I met someone who taught me that power means nothing if it doesn't lift others." He gestured toward Zara. "She'll explain the rest." The room went silent as she stepped up. Her voice trembled on the first sentence, but steadied as she spoke. She told them about overcrowded schools, about Mama Ruby working 3 jobs, about how dance lessons were replaced by streetlights and concrete. "There are hundreds of kids like me," she said. "Kids who have rhythm but no room to move." When she finished, no one clapped right away. The silence was heavier than applause, thoughtful, reverent. Then someone at the back began to clap, and soon the entire boardroom echoed with it. Afterward, Sterling stood beside her, his hand light on her shoulder, no longer a claim of ownership but of pride. "You did it," he whispered. Zara smiled faintly. "No. We did." That evening, as the last guests left, Sterling poured 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To unfinished dances," Zara replied. Outside, the mansion's gardens shimmered under starlight. Somewhere beyond the hedges, the city stretched endlessly, full of children who had never been inside a ballroom and probably never would. But maybe now, they wouldn't have to. Maybe the ballroom could come to them. Zara turned toward Sterling. "When I first came here, you told me nothing was free." He nodded. "And now?" "Now I know freedom isn't free," she said. "But it's worth every fight." The chandeliers above them flickered, casting light that seemed softer, almost human. It was as if the house itself had exhaled. The ghosts were finally at peace, not because they'd been forgotten, but because something living had taken root in their place. In the quiet after the guests were gone, Zara sat at the piano in the hall. Her fingers brushed the keys uncertainly, then found a melody. Not for Elise this time, but something of her own, part waltz, part gospel, part heartbeat. Sterling listened from the doorway, eyes closed, smiling. The foundation was still a plan on paper, but in that moment it already existed, born from grief, shaped by courage, and sustained by hope. The seed had been planted. All it needed now was time to grow. It began with a headline. Billionaire's black heir named in leaked will. The word spread faster than wildfire through Beverly Hills, then across the nation. By noon, news vans lined Sterling's gates, their satellite dishes aimed like weapons. Commentators speculated, strangers debated, and old acquaintances suddenly remembered Sterling's number. Zara learned the news when Mrs. Dawson burst into the breakfast room, pale and trembling. "Child, don't look online," she warned. But the phone in Zara's hand already showed the story, her name in bold type, a picture of her standing beside Sterling at the foundation's launch. Beneath it, hundreds of comments. Some full of admiration. Others, poison disguised as opinion. She manipulated him. She's a project, not a daughter. Classic pity adoption gone wrong. Each word burned. Sterling arrived moments later, his face thunderous. "It was supposed to stay confidential," he snapped, tossing a folded newspaper onto the table. "Someone hacked the files. Now every vulture in California wants a piece. What happens now?" Zara asked, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "What happens," he said grimly, "is war." By evening, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. The board demanded a statement. Investors panicked. A rival corporation, Blackwood Industries, seized the opportunity, calling for a full investigation into Sterling's questionable personal decisions. Zara overheard the argument from the hallway. "She's a child," Sterling barked into the phone. "My heir because she earned it, not because she fits your narrative." But later, when the shouting ended, she saw the weariness in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of losing money. He was afraid of losing her. That fear proved justified. 2 days later, a courier arrived with a summons, Blackwood Industries versus Sterling Enterprises. They were contesting the adoption, claiming mental instability and coercion. In other words, they wanted to prove Zara had tricked him. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Cameras flashed as they entered, Sterling in his tailored suit, Zara in a navy dress Mama Ruby had ironed herself. Outside, protesters chanted both in support and against her. Some held signs that read "Justice for Zara." Others read "Stop the Scam." Inside, the air buzzed with quiet hostility. Blackwood's attorney, Kenneth Morrison, was a legend in corporate law, silver-haired, sharp-tongued, and merciless. He smiled at Zara like a wolf greeting dinner. Sterling's lawyer, Maria Santos, was younger, softer-spoken, but her eyes carried steel. She leaned toward Zara before the hearing began. "Don't be intimidated. Truth has a way of surviving cross-examination." The judge entered. Cameras clicked once more. The trial of legacy had begun. Morrison opened like a showman. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the jury, "we are here because sentiment has replaced sense. Because a grieving man, blinded by guilt, allowed himself to be manipulated by a girl skilled in performance." He turned toward Zara. "You danced, didn't you, Miss Washington? You turned pity into profit." The words hit like stones. But Zara kept her chin high. When Maria Santos rose, her voice was calm but resonant. "The plaintiff wants you to believe kindness is weakness. That compassion is corruption. But this isn't about money. It's about whether love is allowed to cross color and class." She nodded to Zara. The defense calls Miss Zara Washington to the stand. The witness chair felt too big, but Zara sat straight, her palms steady on her lap. Santos began gently. Zara, tell us how you first met Mr. Sterling. Zara took a breath. At his charity gala. I went there for a scholarship interview. He humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. He told me if I could dance a waltz, he'd adopt me. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Morrison objected, claiming irrelevance. The judge overruled him. Zara continued. I danced. Not because I wanted his money, but because I wanted to prove I belonged anywhere I stood. What happened afterward? Santos asked. He adopted me. At first, it felt like rescue. Then I realized he wasn't trying to save me, he was trying to save himself. Her honesty disarmed the courtroom. And now? Santos asked. Now we save each other, Zara said. Morrison approached for cross-examination, smiling like a man about to crush a glass rose. Tell me, Miss Washington, did you ever ask Mr. Sterling for money? No. Did you ever suggest he add you to his will? No. Did you ever? Mr. Morrison, Zara interrupted softly, are you asking if I planned for him to love me? A murmur swept through the spectators. Morrison's smile faltered. Just answer the questions. I am, she said. Love isn't a business plan. The judge's gavel restored silence, but the damage to Morrison's performance was done. When Sterling took the stand, Morrison pounced. Mr. Sterling, is it true you were emotionally unstable after the death of your wife and daughter? Sterling didn't flinch. I was broken, he said. Still am. But adopting Zara didn't make me weaker, it made me human again. Morrison sneered. So this is therapy for you? No, Sterling said, voice sharp as glass. This is redemption. He looked at the jury. That girl reminded me what decency feels like. She's my daughter in every way that matters. For the first time, Zara saw tears glisten in his eyes. Mama Ruby testified next, her lavender hat bright against the courtroom's gray. You can't buy a child's heart, she told Morrison when he pressed her. But you can earn it, same as you earn trust. That man earned it the hard way. Her words carried a power even the judge seemed to respect. After closing arguments, the courtroom fell into the long, tense quiet of deliberation. Zara sat between Sterling and Mama Ruby, fingers intertwined. She didn't pray for victory, just for truth. When the jury finally returned, time seemed to hold its breath. The forewoman stood. We find that the adoption of Zara Washington was conducted legally and in good faith. Furthermore, any attempt to overturn this adoption would be contrary to the best interests of the child. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then applause erupted. Cameras flashed. Zara exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Sterling wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You did it, he whispered. She smiled through tears. No, we did. Outside the courthouse, sunlight cut through the crowd like grace. Reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward. Sterling stepped up to the podium, his voice clear and resonant. Today wasn't about proving Zara deserves to be my daughter, he said. It was about proving I deserve to be her father. The crowd fell silent. He turned toward Zara, eyes shining. She's the future I didn't earn but was given anyway. And I intend to spend the rest of my life living up to that gift. That night, the Sterling estate was quiet again, but no longer haunted. The marble floors seemed warmer, the air lighter. In the living room, Zara sat beside Sterling, both watching the evening news replay footage of the verdict. "They're calling it the trial of legacy," he said softly. Zara smiled. "Then let's make sure it's not the last chapter." Sterling raised his glass. "To new chapters, then." She clinked hers gently against his. For the first time, the chandelier above them didn't feel like judgment. It felt like light. 3 years after the trial that changed everything, the ballroom lights shone again, only this time, they weren't in Beverly Hills. The chandeliers now hung above 1,000 students gathered in the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., where the air buzzed not with wealth, but with hope. Cameras rolled, teachers whispered, and banners above the stage read, "The Elena Foundation, National Education Equity Summit." At 14, Zara Washington stood at the podium, her navy suit crisp, her poise absolute. She didn't need Miss Ashworth's lessons anymore, her confidence had been carved by fire, not etiquette. Sterling sat in the front row, older but lighter, his silver hair gleaming under the lights. Beside him sat Mama Ruby, wearing her favorite lavender hat, holding a handkerchief ready for tears she already knew would come. When Zara began to speak, the room fell silent. 3 years ago, she said, her voice calm but alive, I stood in a ballroom full of people who didn't think I belonged. I was a girl in worn shoes, asked to dance for the amusement of those who had never known hunger or fear. That night was supposed to break me, but instead, it taught me the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes the only way to win their game is to change the music. Applause rippled gently through the crowd. She paused, letting the moment breathe before continuing. I stand here today not as someone rescued by wealth, but as someone who learned to turn pain into purpose. The Elena Foundation isn't charity. It's justice. It's about making sure every child, regardless of color, class, or circumstance, gets the chance to dance their own dance. From the front row, Sterling watched with quiet awe. He remembered the trembling girl who had stood on his marble floor years ago, her voice shaking, her sneakers squeaking. The child he had once pitied had become the leader he admired most. Behind the stage, reporters crowded near the press barrier, recording every word. The Foundation's programs now reached 67 learning centers across 12 states, offering mentorship, tutoring, and scholarships. The initiative had lifted thousands of students toward futures that once seemed impossible. But for Zara, the numbers weren't the story, the faces were. She had visited classrooms in Compton, Detroit, and Baton Rouge. She had watched children write essays about their dreams and perform dances on cracked gym floors. Every time, she saw herself reflected back, the girl no one expected to shine. My grandmother taught me something, she continued. She said, they can polish your shoes, baby, but they can't polish your soul. The Elena Foundation is about keeping that soul alive, in classrooms, in communities, in every child who refuses to give up. Mama Ruby dabbed her eyes, whispering, "That's my baby," while the audience rose to their feet in a wave of applause. After the speech, Zara stepped off stage into a blur of congratulations, educators, senators, journalists, and students wanting photos, autographs, hugs. But amidst the chaos, one familiar voice reached her. Still pretending you're not nervous before a crowd? She turned. Marcus Chin stood near the curtain, taller now, wearing a Stanford University pin. He smiled the same shy smile she remembered from the ballroom. I thought you weren't allowed to talk to me, she teased. My mother changed her mind, he said. She saw your interview on PBS and cried. I think she finally understood. Zara laughed softly. Maybe you should have brought her tonight. She's watching the live stream, Marcus replied. Front row from her living room. They shared a quiet moment, the kind built from years of distance but not forgetting. Then Marcus handed her a letter. I never got to say thank you. You taught me what it means to stand up, even when it costs something. Zara tucked the envelope into her blazer. Then promise me you'll keep standing. For someone else next time. He grinned. Always. That evening, the foundation hosted a dinner to celebrate the program's next phase, a scholarship fund that would send 30 underprivileged students to prestigious boarding schools that had historically served only the wealthy. Sterling raised a glass. To the girl who reminded us that courage can come from anywhere, he said. And to the movement she built, may it outlive all of us. The guests clapped, glasses chimed, and Zara smiled. But deep down, she wasn't thinking about legacy. She was thinking about responsibility. The work was only beginning. Later, after the crowd dispersed, she sat alone by the grand piano near the stage. The lights had dimmed, and outside, the Potomac shimmered under the moonlight. Her reflection stared back from the polished lid, older, sharper, but still holding the same fierce light. Sterling approached quietly. You did well today. Did I? She asked. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough. He sat beside her. You're doing what most adults never dare, turning guilt into growth. Elena would have been proud. And so am I. Zara met his gaze. Do you ever think about her? About the life she might have had? Every day, he said softly. But I also think about the life you're building, and I know she would have wanted that more than anything. They sat in silence for a while. Then Zara pressed a few keys on the piano, letting a melody bloom, slow, graceful, yet full of strength. I don't dance anymore, she said. But this feels like dancing. Sterling smiled. It is. Just a different rhythm. A week later, back in Los Angeles, the foundation's headquarters buzzed with new energy. The walls were covered with artwork from children across the country, paintings, poems, and letters that read, "Thank you for seeing me." Zara spent her days balancing schoolwork with planning sessions, traveling to districts, and mentoring new students. Reporters called her the girl who changed the waltz, but she brushed off the title. It wasn't just me, she always said. It was everyone who believed the floor belonged to them, too. One afternoon, she received a package with no return address. Inside was a small wooden box, the same music box from Elena's room. When she opened it, the ballerina twirled to Fur Elise, the melody soft and full of memory. Beneath it was a note in Sterling's handwriting. For the girl who taught me to open the door. Zara placed it on her desk. This time, the tune didn't sound like grief. It sounded like gratitude. Months later, she stood once more beneath a chandelier, not the one that had humiliated her, but a replica she'd hung in the foundation's main lobby. Around her, students rehearsed for the annual showcase, their laughter echoing through the hall. A young girl with cornrow braids tugged on her sleeve. "Miss Zara, can I show you my dance?" Zara smiled. Of course. The girl pressed play on an old radio, its surface cracked, its sound fuzzy but brave. The same kind of radio Zara once danced to in her tiny apartment. The girl twirled, stumbled, and laughed, arms outstretched toward the light. Zara clapped along, her eyes shining. "That's beautiful," she said. Don't stop. As the girl spun again, her sneakers squeaked softly on the polished floor, the same sound that once betrayed Zara's poverty. Now it was music. That night, as the foundation's lights dimmed, Zara wrote the final entry for their annual report. Change doesn't begin with wealth. It begins with a single act of courage. A single step into a room where you were never invited, and the decision to dance anyway. I once danced to survive. Now, I dance so others can begin. She signed it, closed her laptop, and looked up at the chandelier. Its light shimmered softly across the walls, catching the framed photographs of hundreds of children who had come through the foundation's doors. The music had changed. The ballroom had changed. And for the first time, the dance truly belonged to everyone.